Today's lecture is going to be a bit unusual because it is about home. It is about the place where we live now. It is about the extraordinary natural resources that are here in Athens, Clarke County. It is about the places that we in this room rarely think about when we go about our daily business to and from this university or any of the employment that we have in Athens, Clarke County. But by the end of this lecture, you are going to understand that we live in an extraordinary place and time. In addition, I'm going to show biodiversity patterns across the county, across the state, and across the globe. We're also going to look at threats to the biodiversity both locally and globally. And we're going to look at a brand new biodiversity discovery, which I think you will realize when we get to the end of the talk is again global in nature, not simply local in its importance. And we're going to also talk about conservation successes. It's so difficult, it's so often the case that we have little of positive things to say, but in this case, we have some extraordinary successes. Let me start with some amazing firsts for Athens, Clarke County, and the state of Georgia in terms of its butterfly population. And all of the specimens that I'm going to show here, I'm also going to start passing around so that you can see them. Almost everything here, we'll just go ahead and pass them on around. First, one of the first places is we have the largest butterfly in North America, aptly named the giant swallowtail. We also have the smallest butterfly in North America, which is aptly named the pygmy blue. We have also the fastest flying butterfly in North America, the zebra swallowtail. And that brings us to our first mention of John Abbott. Most of us in this room, and certainly in the Hargret, think of John Abbott as an extraordinary watercolorist who lived in Savannah, Georgia in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And we know of him from his absolutely unparalleled beauty of his entomological drawings, especially those of butterflies. It is believed that no naturalist, no artist has ever drawn butterflies better than John Abbott. An example of that can be seen in the zebra swallowtails, the real specimens on the right, his paintings on the left. These are on exhibit out in the Hargret foyer. And it is the fidelity to the natural world and the excitement of the visual presentation of this artist that most attracts us. But in addition to being an extraordinary artist, Abbott was also an amazing naturalist. Here's that frame which is outside. In his very brief and very succinct description of the zebra swallowtail, he comments that it flies very swift. That one single observation proves to be absolutely correct. No butterfly in North America flies faster than this one. In addition, he made another observation which proved to be sentient. He said that one of the chrysalises that he had changed in the autumn. And with this, he identified a phenomenon which is now known as a double brood. He commented that the growing season of Georgia was longer than the growing season up north, where the zebra swallowtail is also found. But unlike up north, there are 2 broods per year of this and many other species. And Abbott first noticed that in his monograph on the Georgia butterflies. We also have the oldest butterfly, not in North America, but in the entire world. No butterfly lives longer than this one. This lives for 12 months. It's called the mourning cloak, and the way it does it is that it hibernates over winter. It folds its wings, it crawls into a log, and I'm going to morph from this picture to the underside of that same specimen, and it becomes invisible as soon as it disappears into the log. It is hibernating for the winter, and when it comes out, no butterfly in the world lives longer than our mourning cloak. We also have the commonest butterfly in North America. This is called the cabbage white, but that's not its full name. Its full name should be indicated by where I took a picture of it in its type location in Sweden. This is called the European cabbage butterfly, and the commonest butterfly in North America is an invasive species. We also have the butterfly that flies the farthest. This, of course, is the monarch involved in its annual fall migration, which should begin very quickly. We will see them flying across Athens-Clarke County. And I'll make up a new term. We have the mimicryist butterfly in North America. This is the viceroy that models the toxic monarch butterfly. This is not toxic, but it's not eaten because it is a mimic of one that is toxic. So there we have it, the largest, the smallest, the fastest, the oldest, the commonest, the farthest, and the mimicryist. And I put in this frame that I'm passing around the state butterfly, which is the tiger swallowtail. Joseph LeConte was a professor here at the University of Georgia in the early 1800s. And the Georgia butterfly fauna is really quite unique because we have the highest percentage of our butterfly fauna described by one person of any state in the Union. And that person was LeConte. And these are all of the species which he described in his that were named by him. Many of these were species that he took first on the campus of the University of Georgia, right here in Athens-Clarke County. And this is an extraordinary tribute to his work when he was here in Athens-Clarke County. And LeConte described 10% of the Georgia species that are found. And once again, I will pass this one around so that everyone can see it. And again, these are LeConte's species. There we go. So a question that arises is, what is our biodiversity now? And also, what will it become in the future? Currently, there are 55 breeding species of butterflies in Athens-Clarke County, a total of 90 species across the state. That does not include the skippers. So we have about half of the butterflies that are found in the state of Georgia are right here in Athens-Clarke County. Now, one of the things about the future is, what is the climate going to be like, and what are the challenges to the future of our county? In what is an extreme irony, on February 19, 2016, in order to find out what the climate and weather of Athens, Georgia was, you turn to the front page of the New York Times, where Athens, Georgia was used as an example of the long-term warming of the planet. What this graph shows is that 2014 was the hottest year ever recorded in Athens, Georgia. And 2015, was the hottest year ever recorded in Athens, Georgia, with some extreme record highs scattered throughout the year. This is part of a pattern of climate change, which I will describe and show now in this video.
It's official. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announcing today 2015 was the hottest year since record keeping began in 1909. 10 of the 12 months had record high temperatures. Scientists say the record warmth was broadly spread around the world, with 15 of the 16 warmest years on record occurring since 2001.
Stop! No, they call it weather whiplash, a year of historic floods, fires, tornadoes, snow and ice, now whipping from one wild extreme to another. Scientists say climate change is exacerbating the wild swings.
This scene, a street collapsing after a heavy downpour in Baltimore last week, is one example of extreme weather events that may be more common in the future, according to a draft of the National Climate Assessment. The report by a 60-member committee, including the Defense Department, the American Cancer Society, and Chevron, in addition to climate scientists, says the warming is primarily driven by human activity and predicts temperatures in the U.S. could soar by as much as 10 degrees by 2100. And wildfires in the Southwest, like the one near Los Angeles on Thursday, could increase with more intense drought.
President Obama today made a passionate case for reducing carbon emissions, especially from coal-burning power plants, arguing that nothing less than our health, safety, and future are at stake.
I don't want my grandkids not to be able to swim in Hawaii or not to be able to climb a mountain and see a glacier because we didn't do something about it. I don't want millions of people's lives disrupted and this world more dangerous because we didn't do something about it.
Many states are gearing up to fight the plan in court. Other critics say it will cost jobs and your electric bill will go up, claims the White House disputes. It's a fight that will likely continue after the president leaves office and may well end up in Supreme Court. Lester?
All right, Chris, thank you.
We are involved in a massive experiment to change our planet through climate change that is induced by our burning of fossil fuel. This affects Athens, Georgia, and it affects the entire planet. Now, in December of last year, we had the highest temperatures that had ever been recorded in Athens, Georgia. And it was an extraordinary period of time. And it was so warm out that on Christmas Day, my daughter Deline and I decided that we would go butterfly collecting, which you normally don't do on December 25th in Athens, Georgia. And these are the butterflies that we collected on December 25th at the Botanical Garden. And I have mounted them on top of Lee Scherer's wonderful article from Athens Banner Herald called December. Looked a lot like global warming. But this is not a single year phenomenon. This is something that is happening all the time. And I was attuned to the fact that this kind of thing was going on because 2012 was also the hottest year that had been recorded up to that point of time in Athens, Georgia. And in late January, also not a time that we are supposed to be collecting butterflies in Athens, Georgia, I made this collection here, which I will also pass around. And what you will see, we'll blow up one of these labels here. There it is, January 31st, 2012. We are killing the planet. This is happening. We are doing it. It is not something for the future. It is happening right now. This is something we need to get a grip on and to change the politics of Washington in any way, shape, or form that we can. It is threatening our livelihoods and our lives. Now, let's look at what's going to happen to the future state of Georgia. Presently, in 2010, the average temperature was 63 degrees Fahrenheit. The average rainfall was 49 inches of rain. By the end of this century, Georgia is moving to Texas. Yeehaw! And the reason that that's going to happen is because the temperature will rise to an average of 66 degrees and the rainfall will fall to 35 inches, and Atlanta, Georgia will have the weather of Houston, Texas. And I can tell you this, climate scientists and oceanographers are not debating this. There is no debate that this is going to happen. Now, the other special thing that's going to happen to the southeast where we live is there will be a special pressure from climate change because we're getting what is affectionately known in the meteorological terminology as the double whammy. We are having increased temperature and decreased rainfall. Some northern states will also have increased temperature, but their rainfall might increase or might not go down. The droughts that we've seen that have debilitated our state in the last decade are harbingers of things to come. Now, organisms will respond to these changes, as we will see in this NBC News film.
What butterflies in flight may be trying to tell us about something much bigger. There's been a news story developing lately in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's about butterflies, and these butterflies may be onto something bigger than even Massachusetts. We get the story tonight from our Chief Environmental Affairs correspondent, Ann Thompson.
In this lush garden of verbena, butterflies that have long called Northampton, Massachusetts home,
3 American ladies,
are making way for an influx of butterflies from the south, like fiery skippers, until recently more likely to light in Florida and Texas than New England.
we call them accidentals. In the old days, you used to see perhaps 1 or 2 fiery skippers. and now you see dozens.
The shift of southern butterflies to the increasingly warmer north is detailed in the journal Nature. Harvard professor Greg Breed is the study's lead scientist.
But we do see that the species that are more adapted to warmer climates are increasing, and species that are more adapted to colder climates are decreasing. So it seems sensible to infer that this is some climate-driven pattern.
Is it climate change?
That would be the most logical inference.
The study is built on the work of citizen scientists, all members of the Massachusetts Butterfly Club, and the 20,000 sightings they've noted over a period of 19 years. The data includes Tom Gagnon's notes. So how do you keep your records? How do you know what's been here?
Well, I have a running log right here that I keep.
Other club members add their observations to the notebook under the bench from September 2007.
We had 10 common checkered skippers and 2
Southern species.
Yeah, a southern species. This is a southern species, fiery skipper.
This year, the buzz is all about the giant swallowtails, common in the deep south. Have you ever seen 108 giant swallowtails in a season?
Not my whole life, never mind one season.
Like the butterflies they note, some may consider these club members accidentals too, accidental scientists, not Breed.
If they just go out and look and they're interested and they write down what they see, that's a perfectly valid observation.
Seeing nature's patterns change right before their eyes. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Northampton, Massachusetts.
Now, the other thing that I really like about this article is not just that it shows that we have southern species moving north, but the importance of citizen science. And that includes students and lay people, all of whom are contributing to our understanding about planet Earth. So let me make some predictions here about butterflies that we will see more of. We are expecting to see in Athens-Clarke County butterflies that are traditionally more found in South Georgia, Sapelo Island, and in southern Georgia, like the Palamedes swallowtail here, the queen butterfly, the Gorgon skipper, Florida white, and the Florida peacock. We could expect to see more of those. We'll also see more of these tropical moths, like the witch moth that you see here, which Karen found for me under the awning at Target, right here in Athens. And it probably had flown a long way, only to wind up in my net. We will see these. Those are mostly, you find them in the Caribbean. We will see, for the first time, things like the Polydamas swallowtail here, the tropical zebra, which is found in South Georgia and Florida, the barred sulfur here, the Satira yellow, more of the pygmy blue, and the Cassius blue as well. But these are butterflies that we are almost certainly going to see less of because they will not be able to survive. The Gorgon checker spot, Henry's elfin, which is only found in Tallahassee Tract, I'll be talking about that, the goatweed butterfly that you see here, and one of my favorite butterflies for Athens-Clarke County is the dog-faced sulfur. Now, this is the only time that you can get a lepidopterist to say, "Go dogs." But right there it is. Okay. Now, let's talk about the biodiversity in the state of Georgia. To understand the biodiversity in the state of Georgia, you have to make the sign of the cross. You go north to the North Georgia mountains, down to the Okefenokee Swamp, over to the Savannah River Ecology Plant, and over to Warner Robins Air Force Base on the west. And when you do that, you find the biodiversity patterns in the state. The state of Georgia also has its own biodiversity desert. It's called the City of Atlanta. The state of Georgia is quite extraordinary. We are second in terms of the number of lepidopteran species that are here. And in this, I am discounting some of the long lists of butterflies that people in South Texas have achieved by using very large binoculars and looking into Mexico. We're second in amphibians, third in freshwater fish, fourth in reptile diversity, seventh in plant diversity, 15th in bird diversity, and 12th in endemics from the 50 states. We are sixth in overall biodiversity of all the states of the Union, Georgia is an extraordinary place with extraordinary natural resources. Unfortunately, however, we are also 5th in terms of extinctions that have occurred here and 8th in terms of the number of globally imperiled species. There are challenges ahead for what we need to do. Now, the great biologist E.O. Wilson has talked about biodiversity trends globally, and these are the sobering facts that he produces. He suggests that in 10 years, 5% of all the living plant and animal species on this planet will be gone. Within 25 years, 10% gone. Within 75 years, 1/4 of every living species on this planet will be gone. So that is within the lifetime of many of the students in this room. In order to counteract this, what E.O. Wilson has suggested in the New York Times recently, that we engage massively in the protection of land, protection of the habitats in which these species live. And he has set as 25% of the Earth's surface the goal for setting aside to be in preservation. So how is the state of Georgia doing? The state of Georgia is not doing terribly well. We're at 7.8% are involved in, there is preservation and protection for 7.8% of our land mass. Not bad, but still not enough. But this is what the state of Georgia would look like if we achieved Wilson's 25%. That would require a lot of people to be displaced, but what it would do, it would preserve the libraries of information that are contained in the genetics of all the species that we would protect. And Georgia is, as 6th in the country in terms of its biodiversity, one of the states where this kind of protection is especially important. Now, how are we doing in Athens-Clarke County? We're about 5%, but in 2012, something extraordinary happened. The Athens-Clarke County purchased the Tallahassee Forest area, and that was announced with great fanfare in the Athens Banner Herald. That was a major land acquisition, almost 310 acres here in the northwest part of the county, and it's set aside in these forests. Now, Tallahassee Tract is fairly close to where Karen and I live, and I want to begin to explore with you what we have begun to explore in Tallahassee since 2012 and the purchase. Tallahassee Tract goes all the way from Tallahassee Road here. That's the parking lot for Bernie Harris Lyons School up there, that's Tallahassee. It stretches out in this area, and then it opens up into this region here along the Oconee River that you see at the bottom. Let's focus for right now mostly on this central area that is just above the Oconee River. The image that you're seeing now was a Landsat photograph taken in 2013 of this area. And Andrew Saunders, who is part of the Environmental Services Division of Athens-Clarke County, decided that he would do a study looking at prior assessments and images of this area. And the first one he found was from 1938, the USDA agricultural flyover. And here it is, he has georeferenced these to show the exact same area. And the first thing that came out of that is, oh my heavens, there are mature forests on this land already. Now it's true some of it was at the time farmed, but this mature forest did exist. And so what I'm going to do now is to lay this back over onto the 2013 images, this time in green, emphasizing the presence of these old forested areas, which he calls legacy forests, and they are green. For legacy forests, the definition is that a legacy forest is any forest that is older than 50 years. And at present, 75% of the Tallahassee Tract is covered by legacy forests. However, even more interestingly, 50% of this acquisition is covered by forests that we know from the 1938 aerial survey are older than 75 years. But it's more interesting than even that, because in the 1938 survey, many of the trees that could be imaged are themselves more than 75 years old, which means that it is possible that right here in Athens-Clarke County, we have forests that are at least 150 years old and possibly even older. It has been thought that there are no primary forests in the state of Georgia except up in Rabun County, ones that had not been timbered or lumbered. But that is a question that should be asked now for the first time right here in the middle of the Piedmont in Athens-Clarke County. But regardless of whether they had ever been lumbered or not, we still have extremely old forest land right here in Athens-Clarke. Now, there are implications to this, and those implications don't stop. One is that the Department of Natural Resources has identified habitats of critical concern, high priority they're called, and Andrew mapped all of these across Tallahassee Forest. So a large number of DNR's high priority habitats, which are disappearing from the Piedmont, are found right here in Athens-Clarke County. And these are the same habitats which the State Botanical Garden and the University of Georgia published on in a recent book by Edwards, Ambrose, and K. Kirkman with these photographs. And this is a very recent book in which they documented these. So let's look at more of the specifics here. Of the 16 Georgia DNR high priority habitats which are disappearing from the Piedmont, Tallahassee Forest has 9 of them. Already 9 of these are right here in Athens-Clarke County. Tallahassee Forest has 310 acres total, of which 200, that's 65%, are engaged in these high priority habitats. A very high concentration of these extremely rare and endangered habitats from the Piedmont area. Tallahassee Forest is a conservation gem. Now, at the time it was acquired for general reasons. No one knew all of these things about it. But as we have begun to study more and more what the county and you, the taxpayers of Athens-Clarke County, have done, the more extraordinary it proves to have been. And one of the examples of the amazing habitats that's found there can be seen in this infrared aerial photograph, a recent one, in which it identifies these holly forests. Now, most of us think of hollies as holly bushes, little things. But here they are 80-foot trees. They are huge, and they are all over this area. And holly forests are one of those habitats that is endangered. Now, it isn't just the plants that have become of great interest to us in the Tallahassee Forest. I've been collecting there, and it's an amazing place for butterflies. On the left is the purple hairstreak. We've not seen it anywhere else. The Henry's elfin, definitely not anywhere else. The green hairstreak here, and the cobweb skipper, which I'll say a little bit more about. We also have the only record that I have for the goatweed is there, and the wood nymph as well. And the only time I've seen the dogface sulfur in Athens-Clarke County was in fact out there. So here are some of those butterflies from the Tallahassee tract, and I'll pass these around too. It's an amazing group of butterflies, and again, an extraordinary environment. You may see some of these occasionally elsewhere, but they probably came from Tallahassee Forest. It's hard to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this around, but I'm also going to say a good bit more about this one at the bottom here, which is called the gemmed satyr. I'm drawing your attention to the gemmed satyr for a number of reasons. First of all, across the southeast, this is an extremely rare butterfly. If you were to go to a swap meet where you had butterflies for trade or for sale, these specimens here would bring a fairly large amount of money. I'm not going to give the price because I'll tell you in a second why we don't want this little gem to be exploited. This butterfly is also interesting because it was first described by Joseph LeConte, and he commented that it was common on the campus of the University of Georgia. All he needed to do was to go outside and get his net, and he could get one. They are no longer found there. But Tallahassee Forest is amazing. We were out there one time in May. We were looking across a field of grasses growing under these tall, mature trees, and the forest floor seemed to be moving. And it was moving because of all of these gem satyrs that were flying around. There weren't just 5, there weren't just 10, there weren't just 100. There were thousands of these gem satyrs flitting across the forest floor out there. How many places in your lifetime have you within your field of view seen 1,000 butterflies? No, that's unusual, both the abundance as well as the diversity. Okay, let's talk about latitudinal diversity gradients in the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia is very similar to the globe in having a north-south gradation of biodiversity going from higher areas, lower areas in the north to higher areas in the south. And what I want to do is to draw attention to 4 characteristics of the Georgia butterfly fauna. I want to talk a little about dimorphism, and I want to show and compare and contrast these patterns that we begin to find in the state of Georgia as they pertain to what we find in tropical environments as well. I want to talk about wing shape, I want to talk about coloration, and I want to talk about sibling species. Now, sibling species are ones which are look-alike. You can interchange those 2 words, are look-alike species. These are common in the tropics. They're unheard of in the North Temperate. We'll get to that. But first, let's look at sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism is when male and female don't look the same. This is very common in the tropics. It's much more unusual, not unheard of, but it's more unusual in the North Temperate. But here in Georgia, we see an example with the barred sulfur here. This is the male. And now as we morph this image, we're going to see the female that you can see on the bottom. Again, an extraordinary example of sexual dimorphism of these butterflies. The same thing with the dogface sulfur that you see here. This is the male, and now what I'm going to show you is the female morphing here. That's the female. Again, in the state of Georgia, we are beginning to see trends of sexual dimorphism that are more reflective of tropical environments than they are of North Temperate environments. These kinds of differences that I've shown you here would be rare in Massachusetts. We do find them in Georgia. Now, there's something else that is extremely interesting about this particular butterfly and for the female, and that is the pointed tip on the wing. This is the only butterfly in North America that has that kind of a pointed wing, and yet it is very common that we see it here in Georgia. Another example is the female goat wing butterfly that you see here. Now I'm going to do something, I'm going to morph onto the underside, and you're going to see another example of something that's unusual in the North Temperate, but that we find in the state of Georgia. And that is, on the underside, we see the first glimpse of this kind of mimicry of leaves, this camouflage, this morphology. This kind of underside that you see here is common for butterflies in Costa Rica. So what I'm going to do is to morph one of the dead leaf butterflies from Costa Rica right on top of this. And there you see its fullest expression in the tropical environment, but you begin to see the glimmerings of that kind of extraordinary adaptation right here with Georgia butterflies. Now, this is the Diana butterfly as well, and you see the female on the left and the male on the right. Again, in the state of Georgia, an extraordinary example of sexual dimorphism. And the Lady Diana was described in 1779. And what that means is the Lady Diana was the Lady Diana before the Lady Diana was the Lady Diana. All right, so we got that all cleared up. Now, there's another thing that is important about these particular butterflies that we see here for the first time as we move from the North Temperate towards the tropic. we begin to see that extraordinary expression of blue coloration. You see it here, you see it here. I'm going to pass these specimens around. You will be able to see that beginning of the extraordinary irradiant blue coloration that is really almost the hallmark of tropical specimens. These from some of the student collections that we made in Costa Rica, where these iridescent, vibrant blue things are found quite frequently. And we see it here, particularly on the underside of the female lady, Diana, here. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous butterfly, and you will see that as it's passed around. Now, one of the things that was so much fun about the University of Georgia's having purchased UGA Costa Rica is that they had to send teachers down to teach there. And who do you think volunteered? And as Beth so kindly pointed out, I wanted to teach down there, but it was quite clear that I wasn't going to Costa Rican rainforest to teach oceanography up there in the highlands of Monteverde. So I decided I would use something that I had done as a child and my entomological studies to form the core of the readings and the laboratory. And for those of you who are teachers in this room, I'm going to give you the secrets of the powder room. As long as you stay one chapter ahead of the students, you're the authority. So the other thing that I did in Costa Rica is a time-honored thing that only the best teachers do. I got them together, put a net in their hands, and because I really cared about the students, I said, get lost. And that's exactly what they did. Out into the rainforest they went, and back and back and back with the most amazing butterflies they came, of the most amazing things. And for the first couple of days, it was this enthrallment with nature, the love of place, the understanding of the biodiversity, the magnitude of the beauty of the natural world around them that caught them and enthralled them. And after that, we had them do scholarship. Motivate, then educate. You do it the other way, you've lost them. And this was not an easy exercise to put a Latin name on a butterfly. It was not easy at all. And there's one very good reason why that was such a difficult task in Costa Rica. It is because of the phenomenon known as sibling species. These are the ones that are look-alike. In the tropics, sibling species are de rigueur. This is what you expect to find. All three of these, this one, and this one, those are different species. And here the same thing, different species, the top one, the middle one, and the bottom. These are so difficult to tell apart that you can't tell them apart even if it's right in front of your nose. But let's look more closely at that example of sibling species from Costa Rica. If you begin to look very carefully, you begin to see the differences between them. Here, this is a giveaway here. This, you required to notice that the top red is separated from the bottom red. And here again, similar, but some giveaways. This is the characteristics of the tropics, and I will pass around these butterflies that are the ones that you see photographed there, and perhaps we'll have someone run to the back of the room with this tray so everybody gets to see. These specimens are ones that our students caught on one day in Costa Rica, and every specimen in this case is a different species. Sibling species, the hallmark of the tropical environment. So, little was I prepared to understand what we had found on the Talassie Tract. We were collecting these pearly-eye butterflies, and I was making a collection, and I was calling them all the southern pearly-eye. That was certainly what you would expect. But as I began to look more closely, this began to become really different. Now, I'm going to show you here the specimens from Athens, Clarke County, and again, I will also pass these around. All of the butterflies that you see in this frame are from the Tallahassee Tract. We have on the left the upper side, and on the right the underside of each of these species. And their names are to the left. So if we look a little closer, we begin to understand something about those changes. So let's try to see how to tell these things apart. Let's start by counting the dots on the wing, and try that when they're flying past you. All right, 1, 2, 3, we're expanding them from top to bottom. First, we're going to look at the northern pearly-eye. Okay, here it goes, 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. Now, that's the northern pearly-eye described in 1936. Here we have the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's different. That was the Creole pearly-eye described in 1897. And now look at the bottom one. Here we go. We have, for those spots, we have 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Well, that's all you get, folks. There it is. Now, I would also contend that those differences that you were able to see in the Costa Rican sibling species complex are even more cryptic in these specimens here. And I would also point out that despite all the intense interest in North American butterfly species, it took them 150 years to realize these things wouldn't breed true. There it is, 150 years between those descriptions. Now, it turns out there is one other identifying characteristic, which again, you need to watch as they fly by you, and that is the antenna. So, here we go. For the northern pearly-eye, we've got yellow, black, and then kind of yellowish there. And for the Creole, it's yellow, black, and nothing. And then for the southern pearly-eye, it's yellow all the way down. That's another way to tell them apart. That's how cryptic these things are. And that's the southern pearly-eye. Now, we are back to John Abbott. In 1791, Abbott painted this of the pearly-eyes that he had been able to collect. My suspicion is that Fabricius's specimen may actually have come from Abbott. I'm not sure about that. But it's interesting that in his drawing, he decided that he was not going to draw just one butterfly, although he labeled it southern pearly-eye. I will draw your attention to these two butterflies very carefully. If you look at them, what you see is that this one looks like the Creole, and this one looks like the southern pearly-eye. And in fact, these features that he clearly included in his watercolor, and incidentally, this watercolor is outside in the displays, clearly shows that he understood the important morphological differences between these two species. And here, for the southern pearly-eye, once again, as reflected in the extraordinary art of this natural historian and acute observer of the natural world. Now, let's look at the distribution of pearly-eyes across North America. These are the northern pearly-eye distribution records that you see here. For the Creole pearly-eye, it's farther south, not much in Florida, but notice then for the southern pearly-eye, it really is all the way to the bottom. Okay, so what I've done here was to go through taxonomic records for butterflies collected in the state of Georgia from at least 4 different databases around the nation: the Smithsonian, the Georgia Museum of Natural History, and our own collections. And what I'm going to do is show you the counties in the state of Georgia where, over the period of 40 years, all 3 species have been found. These include Rabun County in the north, Floyd, Barrow County, Rockdale County, and Twiggs County in the south of Georgia, and now Athens, Clarke County as well. However, what I'm going to do, and these are from records from the Georgia Museum of Natural History as well as my own collection, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the check marks from all of the counties where they were never found in the same year. And when you do that, you take away, you look for the data, and you take away then Rabun County, Floyd County, Barrow County, Rockdale County, Twiggs County. Only Athens, Clarke County were they ever found in the same place and at the same time. And this is an amazing thing because we have seen them, all 3 species in Tallahassee Forest, at the same time and in the same place within visual sight of where they were collected. So if we look closely at Athens, Clarke County, we can see there it is, Tallahassee Tract, and there we have it, 1, 2, 3, the only place in the world outside the tropics where you have 3 sibling species in the same place and at the same time. Now, we're scientists here, so let's express this as a hypothesis. The working hypothesis that I'm presenting to you today is that Athens, Clarke County is the only place in the world outside the tropics with this kind of a sibling species complex. That is 3 indistinguishable species on the wing at the same time and in the same place. There are many other places outside the tropics where you have 2 sibling species on the wing at the same time in the same place, but never 3. And what I can say is that I have tried to test this hypothesis with more than 100 hours of careful scholarship, and I have been unable to falsify this hypothesis. Now, it is possible that someone will be able to falsify it and find someplace else. My suspicion is probably not. And we have in Athens, Clarke County, a unique ecological process which is never found anywhere else in the world. Now let's look a little bit more about these pearly eye butterflies. First, the habitat for all 3 species is the same. It's lowland, moist forest, and that fits Tallahassee to a T. The behavior is that all 3 of these species sit on oak trees overlooking these moist meadows, and they all sit upside down. There's no difference at all between them. And the males sit on the trees and they fly out to find females. And here's the other amazing thing. They all have the same preferred plant, which is river cane arundinaria that you see here. Now, in the tropics, when you find a sibling species complex, invariably most of those species are feeding on different things. But here, for these 3 species, they're all feeding on the same thing, river cane. The one exception to this is not here in Georgia, but this is the distribution for arundinaria around the southeast. And the northern pearly eye does get farther north, and when it does not have arundinaria to feed on, it will feed on some other kinds of river grasses. But in Athens, Clarke County in the southeast, it, like the others, is a river cane specialist. And we know this too, again, from the University of Georgia Museum here, where the specimens of the pearly eye that had been bred by Jim Maudsley were in the collection, and Jim did the wonderful thing of including the species of plant that he had reared these butterflies on. And there it is, arundinaria. Arundinaria looms large in the history of our state. William Bartram came to Athens, Clarke County in 1771, and he wrote the following. Our route was to the lowlands on the Oconee. I accompanied the hunting party to the banks of this beautiful river. The cane swamps of immense extent are incredibly fertile. This was something that is part of Athens, Clarke County. We are a center for these kinds of river cane. Now I'll tell a story also that Dorset Trapnell shared with me about Mike Moore, who took his botanical class to the river bottom area of the Oconee, out onto the floodplain, and a student looked at this river cane and said, "What's that?" And Mike said, "It's a Rundinaria donax." And at the end of the trip, Mike could see that the students were a little disconsolate, this one was, and he said, "Well, what's wrong?" And the student looked at him and said, "I asked you what that plant was, and you said, I don't know, don't ax." River cane was extremely important to the Cherokee culture. And there has been a suggestion that when the Cherokee were forced to leave Georgia, as much leaving this resource as the trip itself was ultimately damaging to their culture. Okay, so where is Arundinaria found right now? These maps, again provided by Athens, Clarke County, show the distribution of Arundinaria. I think Karen was involved in some of these surveys as well. And what I want to do is to superimpose over this now that 1938 aerial USDA. What you see is this in green is the modern 2016 distribution of Arundinaria. And these are the old farmed fields. And what you can see is that the current modern distribution of Arundinaria is vastly truncated from what William Bartram said was probably out there, and yet it conforms to the old field of the 1938 photograph. And what this means is that even after 80 years, historical patterns of land use are still controlling the distribution and abundance of this critical habitat in Athens, Clarke County. What we do to the land now matters in the future. River cane is highly conservation dependent. We need to remove privet from the river cane habitats. We need to reintroduce fire, probably under controlled conditions, and we need to maintain open canopies. And I'm making these as specific recommendations for how Tallahassee Forest is treated in the future. I also want to draw your attention to this one here, which is another Arundinaria obligate. This is the lacewing skipper that I mentioned before. It will not be in Athens, Clarke County if we do not protect Arundinaria river cane. Now let's look at the broods. Here again, we see this, and from the Georgia Museum of Natural History specimens, we can make the following assessment. Here are the specimens from the museum, here for the northern Pearly here and here, for the southern Pearly here and here, and from the Creole Pearly and from the southern Pearly here and here. And what this means is that we are back to John Abbott, where here in Athens, Clarke County, we have the two double broods that we see of all three of these species co-occurring right here in Athens, Clarke County. Now the question becomes, what is going to happen in the future? Will kids be able to collect butterflies and enjoy this environment as much as I do? And what I want to do to give you an idea of what some futurists think might be happening for child collectors in the future, I'm going to show you a brief clip of film from the Hollywood film 1982 called Blade Runner. Now, in this film, Harrison Ford is trying to find out whether the woman sitting in front of him is a robot or not. But listen to the questions that he asks as we go through this film and the year when the Earth will be defaunated.
Do you like our owl?
It's artificial?
Of course it is.
Must be expensive.
Very. Do you mind if I smoke?
It won't affect the test. All right, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Just relax and answer them as simply as you can. It's your birthday. Someone gives you a calfskin wallet.
I wouldn't accept it. Also, I'd report the person who gave it to me to the police.
You've got a little boy. He shows you his butterfly collection, plus the killing jar.
I take him to the doctor.
So are we heading towards an Earth where these butterflies, all of them from Athens, Clarke County, are no longer found? Each of us in this room has a responsibility, not just at the global level, but at the local level, to support the kinds of conservation efforts that have successfully produced this extraordinary place called Tallahassee Forest. Conclusions that we can reach from this analysis of home. Tallahassee Forest includes 9 of the DNR's 16 high-priority habitats. The high-priority habitats cover 65% of its 314 acres. It has a potentially unique ecological phenomenon of sibling species in the North Temperate on its premises. Tallahassee Forest demonstrates a spectacular example of local conservation, the kinds of things that E.O. Wilson is calling to the world to do. It is an excellent use of taxpayer SPLOST funding. And it is an extraordinary synergism between Athens, Clarke County, the University of Georgia, and NGOs and land trusts across the state. That's the partnership that worked. Tallahassee Forest reminds us of the importance of historical patterns of land use and our need to redouble our efforts to preserve our natural heritage, to conserve our natural resources. And the real hero of all of this is this interaction between these different organizations that have all put in time, sweat, labor, and occasionally tears to make it happen. Oconee River Land Trust, Athens Clarke County Leisure Services, Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission, Audubon Society, State Botanical Garden, Georgia River Network, Odom School, UON's Athens Land Trust and Museum of Natural History, and the Department of Natural Resources. This is how conservation will be done in the future. We have done it here in Athens, Clarke County, and we have achieved something of amazing proportion that may be of global importance. I thank you very much for coming today.